The dust hadn't even settled from the cards hitting the table when Stella Vaughn realized she had lost everything that mattered. The smoky saloon fell silent as Josiah Garrett scooped up the poker chips with one hand and held the deed to her mare, Sweetwater, with the other, his dark eyes showing something that looked uncomfortably like regret rather than triumph. "Madam, I'm real sorry about this," he said quietly, folding the paper she had signed in desperation an hour ago when the pot had seemed so certain to be hers. The year was 1878, and Austin, Texas had seen its share of foolish gambles, but Stella knew this one would haunt her differently than the others. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor, aware that every man in the Red River Saloon was watching her. At 22 years old, she had thought herself smart enough to win back the money her father owed before he died, thought herself clever enough to outwit the professional gamblers who drifted through town. Instead, she had bet the one thing she couldn't afford to lose, and now a stranger owned the only family she had left. "I'll bring her papers by tomorrow," Stella managed, her voice steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of these men who already thought women had no business at the card tables. "Wait." Josiah stood too, and something in his posture made her pause. He was tall, probably 25 or 26, with sun-darkened skin and calluses that spoke of hard work rather than just card games. "Where's your horse stabled?" "Miller's, on the east side of town." She didn't know why she answered, except that his tone held genuine curiosity rather than mockery. "I'll walk with you." It wasn't a question, and before she could protest, he had settled his hat on his head and gestured toward the door. The other players grumbled about the game ending early, but Josiah ignored them, following Stella out into the warm Texas night. The September air carried the scent of mesquite and dust, and somewhere down the street, a piano played a melancholy tune. Stella walked quickly, wanting this humiliation over with, wanting to say goodbye to Sweetwater in private before this cowboy claimed what was now his. "You're a good player," Josiah said after they had walked a block in silence. "Better than most men I've sat across from." "Not good enough," Stella replied bitterly. "That last hand was bad luck, not bad skill. You played it right." She glanced at him sideways, trying to understand why he was being kind when he had every right to gloat. "Does it matter? The result is the same." They reached Miller's stable and the elderly owner was already closing up for the night. He nodded at Stella, then eyed Josiah with suspicion. "Evening, Miss Vaughn. This fellow bothering you?" "No, Mr. Miller, he's with me." The words tasted like ash, but they were true enough. She led the way to the stall where Sweetwater waited, the gray mare nickering softly when she recognized Stella's footsteps. The horse was beautiful, dappled like morning fog over the Colorado River, with intelligent eyes and a gentle disposition that had made her Stella's closest companion for the past 5 years. Her father had bought Sweetwater for her 17th birthday, back when the Vaughn family still had money, before the bad investments and worse decisions that had left Stella alone and nearly destitute. "Hey, sweet girl," Stella murmured, pressing her forehead against the mare's neck and breathing in the familiar smell of horse and hay. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Josiah stood at the stall door, quiet, and when Stella finally turned around, she was surprised to see that he looked genuinely troubled. "She means a lot to you," he said. "It wasn't a question. She's all I have left." Stella hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant to reveal that vulnerability, but the words came out anyway. "My father died 3 months ago. He left debts I've been trying to pay off. I thought if I could win enough tonight, I could clear them and start fresh. Instead, I lost the only thing of value I still own." Josiah was silent for a long moment, studying the horse, then studying Stella. Finally, he pulled the deed from his pocket and looked at it in the dim lamplight. "What's her name?" "Sweetwater." "That's a good name." He turned the paper over in his hands, and Stella watched, confused, as something like an internal battle played out across his features. Then he stepped closer to her and held out the deed. "Here," she stared at him. "What? Take it. She belongs with you, not me." Stella's heart hammered in her chest. "I don't understand. You won her fair and square." "Fair and square doesn't always mean right." Josiah pressed the deed into her hands, his fingers warm against hers for just a moment. "I'm a cowboy, Miss Vaughn. I've got my own horse, a good gelding who's been with me for years. I don't need another one, and I sure as hell don't need one that's going to pine for her rightful owner. Animals know who they belong to. So do I." Tears spilled down Stella's cheeks before she could stop them. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "Maybe that's exactly why I can do it," he said softly. "I don't have any stake in whatever debts your father left or what mistakes brought you to that saloon tonight. All I know is that taking a woman's horse when she's clearly already down on her luck wouldn't sit right with my conscience. So please take her. She's yours." Stella looked down at the deed in her trembling hands, then back up at this stranger who had just given her back the most precious thing in her world. "I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just take better care with your bets from now on." His voice was gentle, teasing even, and it made something warm bloom in Stella's chest despite everything. "I will. I promise I will." She clutched the deed to her chest, then impulsively grabbed his hand. "What's your name? Your full name?" "Josiah Garrett. Most folks call me Joe." "Well, Josiah Garrett, I owe you a debt I can never repay." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. But if you want to do something for me, you could tell me where a man might find a decent meal in this town. I just rode in this afternoon, and that saloon food wasn't fit for eating." Stella found herself laughing through her tears. "I'm not much of a cook, but I could manage breakfast tomorrow if you'd like. It's the least I can do." "I'd like that very much, Miss Vaughn. Stella, please call me Stella. Only if you call me Joe." He smiled at her then, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less weathered. "Where should I meet you?" "I'm staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street, the one with the blue shutters. Mrs. Henderson owns it. Come by around 7. I'll be there." He tipped his hat to her, then to Sweetwater, who had been watching the entire exchange with pricked ears. "Take care, ladies." Stella watched him walk away into the darkness, this mysterious cowboy who had just changed everything with a simple act of kindness. She stood there for a long time, holding the deed and stroking Sweetwater's soft nose, trying to understand what had just happened. When she finally made her way back to the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson was wading up, her round face creased with worry. "Stella, honey, where have you been?" "I was starting to fret." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I had something I needed to take care of." Stella couldn't quite explain the evening, not yet, so she simply kissed the older woman's cheek and headed upstairs to her small room. That night, she lay awake for hours, thinking about Josiah Garrett's dark eyes and quiet voice, the way he had looked at Sweetwater and somehow understood what the horse meant to her. She thought about the calluses on his hands and the dust on his boots, the way he had followed her to the stable without being asked, as if he had known she would need a witness to her heartbreak. Most of all, she thought about the fact that he had given back what was rightfully his by the laws of the game, and what that said about the kind of man he was. Morning came bright and warm, typical for September in Austin. Stella woke early and borrowed Mrs. Henderson's kitchen, making biscuits and gravy, frying eggs and bacon, brewing strong coffee. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar tasks while her mind raced with questions. Why had Josiah really given back the horse? What was he doing in Austin? How long would he stay? At precisely 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Henderson answered it, and Stella heard her cheerful voice greeting someone. A moment later, Josiah appeared in the kitchen doorway, hat in hand, looking freshly washed and somehow nervous. "Morning," he said. "Something smells wonderful. Morning." Stella gestured to the small table by the window. "Please sit. I hope you're hungry." They ate together in the boarding house kitchen, and Stella found herself studying him in the morning light. He had strong features, a straight nose and a firm jaw, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often despite the serious expression he had worn last night. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, and his hands were never quite still, always reaching to adjust his coffee cup or fold his napkin. "Tell me about yourself," Stella said finally, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen. "Where are you from, originally?" "A little town in Missouri you've probably never heard of. My parents had a farm there, but it failed during the war. After they passed, I drifted south, worked on ranches all through Kansas and the Oklahoma Territory. Been mostly in cattle country the last few years. What brings you to Austin?" Josiah took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "I'm looking to buy land, actually. I've been saving for a long time, and I heard there were opportunities down here in Texas. Good land going for reasonable prices if you know where to look. You want to start a ranch, something like that. Maybe not a big operation, but enough to run cattle, maybe breed horses. I'm tired of working for other men, tired of drifting. I want something that's mine." Stella understood that desire more than he could know. "What were you doing playing poker if you're trying to save money?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Fair question. I heard about the game, heard there was good money in the pot. I figured one night wouldn't hurt, and I'm good enough at cards that I usually come out ahead. I didn't expect." He trailed off, meeting her eyes. "I didn't expect you." Something in the way he said it made Stella's breath catch. "I must have seemed so foolish." "No." His response was immediate and firm. "You seemed desperate, which is different. Desperation makes people take risks they wouldn't normally take. I know because I've been there myself." "What happened to make you desperate?" Josiah was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "After my parents died, I had nothing. No money, no prospects, no family left to turn to. I was 17 years old and completely alone. I made some bad choices, fell in with some rough men. Nearly ended up on the wrong side of the law before a ranch foreman named Dutch took a chance on me, gave me honest work and a reason to get my life straight. I've been working hard ever since, trying to become the kind of man Dutch believed I could be. He sounds like a good man. The best. He died 2 years ago, and I've been drifting ever since, but he always told me I should find my own place, put down roots. Said a man needs something to fight for, something to build. That's what I'm trying to do now." Stella refilled their coffee cups, thinking about her own situation. "My father left me with nothing but debts and that horse. I've been trying to figure out how to start over, but it seems like every step forward comes with 2 steps back. Last night, I thought I had finally hit bottom. Then you gave me back Sweetwater, and I realized maybe I still had a chance." "What will you do now?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I need to find work, real work that pays more than the occasional sewing jobs I've been taking. Mrs. Henderson has been kind enough to let me stay here, but I can't impose on her charity forever. I've thought about leaving Austin, going somewhere where no one knows my father's name or his debts, but this is my home. I was born here. I know every street, every shop, every person. Leaving feels like giving up, like admitting defeat." Josiah nodded slowly. "I understand that. There's something to be said for standing your ground, for fighting for what's yours. But sometimes starting fresh isn't defeat. Sometimes it's survival. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Stella learned that Josiah loved to read, that he carried a battered copy of Shakespeare's sonnets in his saddlebag, that he had a weakness for apple pie and a fear of deep water. He learned that Stella had taught herself to play poker by watching the men in her father's study, that she could ride better than most cowboys, that she dreamed of opening a horse ranch someday where she could breed and train quality animals. "You should do it," Josiah said when she mentioned the dream. "I've seen the way you handle Sweetwater. You've got a gift with horses. A gift doesn't pay bills. No, but it's a start. Every successful rancher I've ever met started with a gift and a lot of hard work." He stood then, collecting his hat. "Thank you for breakfast. It was the best meal I've had in months. Thank you for giving me a reason to cook it." Stella walked him to the door, suddenly not wanting him to leave. "Will you be staying in Austin long? At least a few weeks?" "I need to look at some properties, talk to some land agents." "Why?" "I just thought maybe we could talk again. If you wanted to, I mean. You're easy to talk to, and I don't have many friends in town these days." She felt her cheeks warm at the admission. Josiah's smile was genuine and warm. "I'd like that very much. In fact, if you're free this afternoon, I could use someone who knows the area to show me around. I'm supposed to meet with a man about a property south of town, but I don't know the roads very well." "I know them all," Stella said immediately. "I could ride with you if you don't mind the company." "I'd welcome it." He settled his hat on his head. "Shall I meet you at Miller's stable around 2? "Perfect." After he left, Stella spent the rest of the morning in a daze helping Mrs. Henderson with chores and trying not to think too hard about the flutter in her stomach every time she remembered Josiah's smile. She told herself it was just gratitude, just relief at not losing Sweetwater, but deep down she knew it was something more. At 1:30, she changed into her riding clothes, the split skirt and boots she had worn since she was a girl, and made her way to the stable. Sweetwater was eager for the exercise, dancing a little as Stella saddled her. When Josiah arrived on a handsome bay gelding, the two horses sniffed each other curiously before settling into an easy tolerance. "That's a fine horse," Stella commented, admiring the gelding's strong build and alert eyes. "This is Red. He's been with me for 4 years now, through thick and thin. Best horse I've ever owned." Josiah patted the gelding's neck affectionately. "Though your Sweetwater is something special too, gray horses always catch the eye." They rode out of Austin together, following the road south toward the Colorado River. The day was beautiful, with a light breeze keeping the heat manageable and clouds drifting lazily across the bright blue sky. Stella found herself relaxing in the saddle, enjoying the familiar rhythm of the ride and the easy silence between them. "The property I'm looking at is called the Morrison Place," Josiah said after a while. "About 800 acres, mostly grassland with some wooded areas along the river. The owner died last year, and his widow wants to sell and move back east to be with her daughter." "I know that land," Stella said, surprised. "It's beautiful country, good for cattle and horses both. There's a natural spring on the eastern edge that never runs dry, and the grass is some of the best grazing in the area." That's what the land agent told me. But he also said the house needs work, and the fences are in poor repair. The price reflects that, but it still might be more than I can afford. They rode on, and Stella pointed out landmarks, telling him about the history of the area, the families who had settled there, the changes she had seen over the years. Josiah listened intently, asking questions, storing away information. She realized he was the kind of man who paid attention, who took things seriously, who thought before he acted. The Morrison place was about an hour's ride from town, and when they arrived, Stella could see why Josiah was interested. The land rolled gently toward the river, covered in rich grass that waved in the breeze. Stands of oak and mesquite provided shade, and in the distance, she could see the glint of water where the Colorado curved through the property. The house was small but solidly built, a simple structure of wood and stone with a covered porch and a stone chimney. The barn was larger, designed for horses and cattle both, with good bones despite the obvious neglect. Fences sagged, and weeds had taken over what might once have been a vegetable garden, but the potential was unmistakable. "It's perfect," Stella said softly, imagining what the place could become with work and care. "You think so?" Josiah had dismounted and was walking the fence line, testing posts, examining the condition of the wood. "I know so. This land is worth 3 times what they're probably asking, even with the repairs needed. If you can afford it, you should buy it." He turned to look at her, shading his eyes against the sun. "You sound certain." "I am. I've lived in Austin my whole life. I know good land when I see it, and this is some of the best." She swung down from Sweetwater's back and walked over to join him. "The spring I mentioned is just over that rise. Want to see it?" They left the horses to graze and walked together across the property. Stella showed him the spring, crystal-clear water bubbling up from underground and forming a small pool before trickling away to join the river. She showed him the best spots for building additional corrals, pointed out where the wind would come from in winter and where the shade would fall in summer. Josiah soaked it all in, his expression growing more animated as they explored. "You really do know this land." "My father used to bring me out here when I was young. He and Mr. Morrison were friends before the debts started piling up and my father couldn't afford to keep up his social connections. I learned to ride on this property, actually. Mr. Morrison let me practice on his horses when I was just a girl." "Then it means something to you too." "It does," Stella admitted. "I always thought it would be wonderful to own a place like this, but that was just a child's dream." Josiah stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "Why does it have to stay a dream? You know horses, you know the land, you've got the skills to make a ranch work. What's stopping you?" "Money," she said simply. "I don't have any, and no bank is going to loan to a single woman with her father's debts hanging over her head. That's not fair." "Fair doesn't matter much in the real world." Stella tried to keep the bitterness from her voice, but wasn't entirely successful. "I made my peace with it a long time ago." They walked back to the horses in silence, and Stella worried that she had said too much, revealed too much of her disappointment and frustration. But when they mounted up to ride back to Austin, Josiah seemed thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. "I'm meeting with the land agent tomorrow morning," he said as they followed the road back north. "If the numbers work out the way I hope, I'll make an offer on the place. I think you should. It's a good investment. Would you help me?" The question came suddenly, and Stella turned to look at him in surprise. "Help you how? With the ranch?" "If I buy it, I'll need to hire hands, but I'll also need someone who knows the land, who understands horses, who can help me make decisions about stock and breeding and all the things I don't have experience with. I'm good with cattle, but horses are different." "You said yourself you wanted to breed and train horses someday. This could be a start." Stella's heart was racing. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership if you want it. You bring your knowledge and your skills, I bring the money to buy the land and get started. We build something together." It was too much, too fast, too good to be true. Stella shook her head, trying to clear it. "You don't even know me. How can you trust me with something this important?" "I trust you because you love that horse enough to risk everything for her," Josiah said simply. "I trust you because you know this land and you haven't let your father's mistakes break you. I trust you because when I look at you, I see someone who fights for what matters. That's the kind of partner I want." They were approaching the outskirts of Austin now, and Stella's mind was spinning with possibilities and fears. It was everything she had dreamed of, but it also felt impossible, too risky for both of them. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "This is a big decision." "Of course. Take all the time you need." But Josiah was smiling, and Stella had the feeling he already knew what her answer would be. That evening, Stella sat on the porch of the boarding house with Mrs. Henderson, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. She told the older woman everything, about the poker game and Josiah giving back Sweetwater, about the ranch and the partnership he had offered. Mrs. Henderson listened carefully, her weathered hands busy with knitting needles. "What does your heart tell you?" she asked when Stella had finished. "My heart tells me to say yes, but my head tells me to be cautious. I barely know this man. Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected places," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "Your father, God rest his soul, was a good man who made bad choices. You've been living in the shadow of those choices for too long. Maybe it's time to step into the light. But what if I fail? What if I can't do what he thinks I can do? And what if you succeed? What if this is exactly what you're meant to do?" The older woman set down her knitting and took Stella's hand. "I've known you since you were a girl, Stella Vaughn. I've watched you handle your father's decline with grace, watched you shoulder burdens that would have crushed lesser women. You're strong and smart and capable. If this man sees that in you after only a day, then maybe he's someone worth taking a chance on." Stella squeezed her hand gratefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. And between you and me," the older woman added with a twinkle in her eye, "that Josiah Garrett is quite handsome. I wouldn't mind seeing more of him around here." Stella felt herself blushing. "This is about business, not romance." "Of course it is, dear, but there's no law saying it has to stay that way." Mrs. Henderson picked up her knitting again, but she was hiding a smile. That night, Stella made her decision. In the morning, she went to find Josiah at the small hotel where he was staying. He was just finishing breakfast in the dining room when she arrived, and his face lit up when he saw her. "I've been thinking about your offer," Stella said without preamble, sitting down across from him. "And I want to accept, if you'll still have me." "Still have you? Stella, I was hoping all night that you'd say yes." He reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "This is going to be good. I can feel it." "I hope you're right." But looking at his eager expression, his genuine excitement, Stella found herself believing him. Over the next few weeks, their lives became a whirlwind of activity. Josiah made his offer on the Morrison place, and after some negotiation, the widow accepted. While the legal papers were being drawn up, he and Stella spent every day together, planning and preparing. They drew up lists of supplies they would need, discussed what kind of stock to start with, debated the merits of different horse breeds. Stella discovered that Josiah was a careful planner, but also willing to listen to her ideas and expertise. He never dismissed her suggestions or talked down to her, treating her as a true partner rather than just a hired hand. She found herself looking forward to their morning meetings over coffee, their afternoon rides to inspect the property, their evening discussions about everything from ranch business to philosophy to their favorite books. She also found herself noticing things about him that had nothing to do with business. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the gentle way he handled horses, the consideration he showed to everyone he met, from the bank manager to the stable boy. The way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, something warm and wondering in his gaze. One evening in late October, they were sitting on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the property that was now officially Josiah's. They had spent the day repairing fence posts, hard physical labor that had left them both tired but satisfied. Stella had brought sandwiches and lemonade from town, and they ate while discussing plans for the barn repairs. "I was thinking," Josiah said, setting down his glass, "that we should make this official. The partnership, I mean. Draw up legal papers so everything is clear and fair." "That makes sense," Stella agreed, though part of her felt disappointed that he was approaching their relationship so formally. "I want to make sure you're protected," he continued. "If something happens to me, or if things don't work out between us for some reason, you should have legal claim to half of everything we build here. You're putting in just as much work as I am, and you should have security." "That's very generous." "It's not generous, it's fair." He turned to face her more fully. "But there's something else I've been wanting to say, and I keep losing my nerve." Stella's heart started to pound. "What is it?" "This partnership has been the best thing that's happened to me in years. Not just because of the ranch, but because of you. Getting to spend every day with you, learning how you think, watching you work with the horses, listening to your laugh. It's made me realize that I don't just want a business partner. I want more than that." "Joe," she whispered, hardly daring to breathe. "I know it's only been a few weeks. I know we should probably be sensible and keep things professional. But I've never been good at hiding what I feel, and the truth is I'm falling in love with you, Stella. Maybe I started falling that first night in the saloon when you looked at me with so much fire in your eyes. Maybe it was when you pressed your forehead against Sweetwater's neck, and I saw how much you loved her. Maybe it was over breakfast when you told me about your dreams. I don't know exactly when it happened, but it did, and I needed you to know." Stella felt tears welling up, but they were happy tears this time. "I've been feeling the same way," she confessed. "I kept telling myself it was too soon, that I should focus on the ranch, that I couldn't afford to fall for someone when I had so much else to figure out. But every morning I wake up excited to see you. Every evening I go to bed thinking about something funny you said or the way you smiled at me. You gave me back my horse and my dreams and my hope all at once, Joe. How could I not fall in love with you?" He stood up and pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her arms. "Can I kiss you, please?" she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and sweet and perfect. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the feeling she had been holding inside, all the gratitude and affection and growing love that had been building since that night in the saloon. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Josiah rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, take you to dinners and dances, give you the romance you deserve. But I also want you to know my intentions are serious. I'm not playing games with your heart." "I know you're not," Stella said, touching his face, feeling the roughness of late-day stubble under her fingers. "That's one of the things I love about you. You're honest and straightforward and good." They stood there on the porch as the sky darkened around them, holding each other and talking about the future, about what they wanted and hoped for. Stella had never felt so safe, so cherished, so hopeful about what was to come. Over the following months, they worked harder than Stella had ever worked in her life. They repaired the house and barn, mended miles of fence, cleared brush and planted gardens. Josiah hired 3 ranch hands, good men who treated Stella with respect and took direction from her without complaint. She proved her worth over and over, demonstrating her knowledge of horses and her skill in training and handling them. They bought their first breeding stock in November, 2 mares and a quality stallion that Stella selected after days of careful evaluation. She was cautious with Josiah's money, wanting to prove she could make smart investments, and her choices proved sound. By spring, both mares were in foal, and word was spreading about the Garrett Ranch and its talented horse trainer. Josiah courted her through the winter, taking her to Austin for dinners at the nicest restaurant, attending church socials and town dances where they were quickly becoming known as a couple. He was attentive and affectionate, bringing her wildflowers he picked on the range, reading poetry to her on quiet evenings, making her laugh with his dry wit and easy humor. Stella paid off her father's debts with her share of the ranch profits, a moment of deep satisfaction that brought tears to her eyes. She was finally free of that burden, finally able to hold her head up in town without shame. Mrs. Henderson cried with her when she told her, proud as any mother would be. In March of 1879, on a warm evening with spring flowers blooming across the ranch, Josiah took Stella riding to the spring where they had walked that first day. They sat by the water, and he took her hand. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "About what I want my life to look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And in every version of that future I imagine, you're there beside me, not just as my partner in the ranch, but as my wife, as the mother of my children, as the person I share everything with." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It's not much, but it's the best I could afford. Stella Vaughn, will you marry me? Will you build this life with me, not just the ranch, but a family and a home and a future?" "Yes," Stella said through happy tears. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, glinting in the fading light. They kissed by the spring where water bubbled endlessly from the earth, where new life was always beginning, and Stella felt that her own new life was finally, truly starting. They were married in June in the small church in Austin, with Mrs. Henderson weeping joyfully in the front pew and half the town in attendance. Stella wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Josiah wore his best suit, looking nervous and proud and so handsome that Stella's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food that the whole community contributed to. They danced under the stars while a fiddle player provided music, and Stella felt surrounded by love and goodwill. Even people who had known her father and his debts came to wish them well, seeing in Stella and Josiah's success a story of redemption and new beginnings. Their wedding night was spent in the house they had repaired together, in the bedroom they had painted and furnished. Josiah was gentle and patient, making Stella feel cherished and beautiful. They loved each other through the warm summer night, and Stella thought about how far she had come from that desperate woman in the saloon, betting everything on a losing hand. The years that followed were full of hard work, but also deep happiness. The ranch prospered, their reputation for quality horses growing throughout Texas. Stella proved to be everything Josiah had believed she could be, a skilled trainer and breeder whose instincts were nearly always right. They expanded their operation, buying more land, building better facilities, hiring more help. In the spring of 1880, Stella discovered she was pregnant. She told Josiah one morning over breakfast, nervous about how he would react. But he let out a whoop of joy and lifted her right off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed and protested. He was attentive throughout her pregnancy, worrying over her health, insisting she not work too hard, driving her slightly crazy with his concern. Their first child, a son, was born in November during a cold snap that brought the first frost of the season. They named him Isaac, and Josiah cried when he first held the tiny boy in his arms. Stella watched her strong cowboy husband turn to mush over the baby, singing to him and rocking him and changing his diapers without complaint. Being a mother while running a ranch was challenging, but Stella found she could do both with help from Josiah and Mrs. Henderson, who came to stay with them for several months. The older woman doted on little Isaac, telling Stella how proud she was of everything she had accomplished. When Isaac was 2 years old, Stella gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Alice, who came into the world squalling and demanding and perfect. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos and love, and Josiah expanded the house to give them all more room, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The children grew up on horseback, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk. Isaac inherited his mother's gift with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and soft words. Emma was bold and adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring the far corners of the ranch. Alice was quieter but observant, noticing things others missed, asking questions that showed a sharp mind. The ranch continued to thrive. By 1885, they were known throughout Texas and beyond for their quality horses. Buyers came from as far as California and Missouri to purchase Garrett stock. Stella had achieved her childhood dream and more, building something substantial and lasting. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Josiah took Stella back to the spring where he had proposed. The children were home with Mrs. Henderson, who still lived with them and had become as much family as any blood relative. It was a warm June evening, much like the one when they had become engaged, and the spring looked exactly as it had that day. "You remember what I said here?" Josiah asked, holding her hand. "You asked me to marry you. You said you wanted to build a life together. And we did. We built something better than I ever imagined." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You know what the best part is? Giving you back Sweetwater that night. If I had kept her, I never would have gotten to know you. I never would have fallen in love with you. I would have missed out on everything that matters most to me." Stella looked up at her husband, seeing gray threading through his dark hair now, lines deepening around his eyes, his face marked by years of sun and wind and work. He was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "She belongs with you, not me," Stella quoted softly. "That's what you said that night, but you were wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You belong with me too, you always have." They stood by the spring as the sun set. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had built a life and a love that would last long after they were gone. The ranch would pass to their children and grandchildren, the legacy of a poker game gone wrong and a cowboy who had chosen kindness over keeping what he had won. As they walked back to the house, they could see the lights glowing in the windows, hear the children's laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Sweetwater and Red grazed peacefully in the pasture, old now but still healthy, their long friendship a mirror of their owner's love story. The spring of 1890 brought another grandchild, Isaac's first son, and Josiah and Stella found themselves in the unexpected joy of grandparenthood. They spent long evenings on the porch, watching the sunset over land they had transformed, holding hands like they had from the very beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" Stella asked one evening. "Giving back the horse, taking a chance on me?" Josiah turned to her with such love in his eyes that her breath caught even after all these years. "Not for a single second. You were the best bet I ever made, Stella Garrett. The only one that really mattered." She leaned her head on his shoulder, content and grateful and deeply, completely happy. They had built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were gone. It had started with a card game and a moment of unexpected kindness, and it had grown into a love story that would be told for generations. The ranch hands would talk about it around campfires, the story of how the boss had won a horse in a poker game and given it back because he knew it belonged with its owner. How that simple act of decency had led to a partnership, then a courtship, then a marriage that became legendary in its devotion. How two people had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built an empire together. But for Stella and Josiah, it was never about the empire or the legend. It was about the quiet moments, the shared glances, the way their hands still fit perfectly together after decades of marriage. It was about watching their children grow and thrive, about teaching their grandchildren to ride, about sitting on the porch as the sun set and knowing they had lived a good life together. In the summer of 1895, they celebrated their 20th anniversary with a huge party. All three children were there with their families, Mrs. Henderson still spry and sharp at 82, dozens of friends and neighbors and ranch hands past and present. There was music and dancing and feasting, and speeches that made Stella cry happy tears. Isaac stood up to toast his parents, holding his own young son on his hip. My father likes to say that the best decision he ever made was giving back a horse, but I think the best decision they both made was taking a chance on each other, believing in each other, building something together. They taught us that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day, a partnership you work at, a commitment you honor even when things get hard. Mom, Dad, thank you for showing us what true love looks like. As everyone raised their glasses, Josiah squeezed Stella's hand under the table. She looked at him and saw the same man who had followed her to the stable that night, who had pressed a deed into her hands and told her the horse belonged with her, who had seen something in her worth believing in when she had almost stopped believing in herself. "I love you," she mouthed silently. "I love you too," he mouthed back. The party went late into the night, but eventually everyone went home or to bed, and Stella and Josiah found themselves alone on the porch once more, their favorite place, watching the stars wheel overhead. Sweetwater had passed peacefully 2 years ago at the remarkable age of 22, but Red still grazed in the pasture, an old gentleman now but still sound. "We've been blessed," Josiah said quietly, "more than I ever thought possible." "We made our own blessings," Stella replied. "With hard work and faith and love. And a little luck. If I hadn't been in that saloon that night, if you hadn't bet your horse, if I had been a different kind of man who would have kept what he won. But you weren't. You were exactly who you were meant to be." Stella stood and pulled him to his feet. "Dance with me." "There's no music. We don't need music." So they danced on the porch of the ranch house they had built together, swaying slowly to a rhythm only they could hear. And if the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, if the night seemed a little softer, if the world seemed to pause for just a moment to witness their love, well, perhaps that was just the way of things when something rare and beautiful existed in the world. Years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more successes, occasional sorrows. They lost Mrs. Henderson in 1897, a peaceful passing that nonetheless left a hole in their lives. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, their children taking on more responsibility as Stella and Josiah aged. In 1900, as a new century dawned, they took a trip back to Austin, walking through the streets of their youth. The Red River Saloon was still there, though under new ownership now. They stood outside it, remembering. "Should we go in?" Josiah asked. "No," Stella said, taking his arm. "I don't need to. Everything good in my life started because of what happened there, but I don't need to revisit it. I'd rather move forward, not back." They walked to Miller's stable, which had been taken over by old Mr. Miller's son. He remembered them, remembered Sweetwater, and he smiled when he saw them. "You two have quite a story," he said. "My father used to talk about it all the time, said it was the most romantic thing he ever witnessed." "It felt pretty desperate at the time," Stella admitted. "The best love stories usually do," the younger Miller replied. "That's what makes them worth telling." As they left Austin that day, heading back to the ranch that had been their life's work, Stella reflected on how true those words were. Their story had started in desperation and loneliness, in a moment when she had lost everything, and a stranger had given it back. But it had grown into something neither of them could have predicted, something richer and deeper and more lasting than any bet or bargain. They celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1904, surrounded by children and grandchildren, by friends and neighbors, by the life they had built acre by acre, day by day, choice by choice. Josiah was slower now, his hair completely gray, his body showing the effects of decades of ranch work. Stella's hands had arthritis that made fine work difficult, and her face showed every year of sun and wind. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people they had been that night in the saloon, still felt the flutter of excitement and attraction, still chose each other over and over again. "If you could go back," Josiah asked her that night as they prepared for bed, "and change anything about how our life unfolded, would you?" Stella thought about it seriously, about the hard years and the losses, about the struggles and the times she had doubted herself. Then she thought about everything else, all the joy and love and accomplishment, the children who were her pride, the man who had been her partner in everything. "Not a single thing," she said firmly. "Every moment, good and bad, led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." In their later years, they spent more time sitting and less time working, but they were still active in ranch decisions, still consulted on major purchases or breeding decisions. Their children ran the day-to-day operations now, but the ranch would always be Stella and Josiah's in the ways that mattered most. They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1909 and their 40th in 1919, each milestone bringing more family, more friends, more celebration of a love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something legendary. Stella was 63 years old now, Josiah 66, and they moved slowly but contentedly through their days. On a warm evening in the spring of 1920, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful, testimony to everything they had built. Their great-grandchildren played in the yard, the latest generation to grow up on this land. "You know what I think about sometimes," Stella said, holding Josiah's weathered hand in hers. "That poker game. How I sat down at that table thinking I could win everything I needed, and instead I lost the only thing I had left. How terrible that felt in the moment. And now I realize I didn't lose anything that night. I won everything. I won you." Josiah lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "We won each other. That's the real story. Not about the horse or the bet or even the ranch. About two people who found each other when they both needed it most and decided to build something beautiful together." "Tell me again," Stella said softly. "Tell me what you said that night." Josiah smiled, remembering. In a voice that was older but still strong, still sure, he repeated the words that had changed both their lives. "She belongs with you, not me." "And you were right," Stella whispered. "About everything." They sat together as the sun set on another day, on another year, on a life well lived, and a love that had endured through 4 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. The ranch that had started as Josiah's dream and Stella's hope had become a testament to what two people could build when they chose to believe in each other. And somewhere in the pasture, the descendants of Sweetwater and Red grazed peacefully, carrying on the legacy of the 2 horses whose owners had found love in the most unexpected of places, all because a cowboy had chosen kindness over keeping what he had won, and a woman had chosen to trust the stranger who gave back what mattered most. Their love story would be told for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come not from winning or taking, but from giving and sharing and choosing to see the person rather than just the opportunity. It was a story about second chances and new beginnings, about building something together that neither could have built alone. And it had all started with a card game, a horse named Sweetwater, and a simple phrase that changed everything. She belongs with you, not me. Those 8 words had been the beginning of a love that would last a lifetime, a partnership that would build an empire, and a legacy that would endure long after its creators were gone. Proof that sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what you win, but what you choose to give away.